Welcome and thank you for being here today. I'm super excited to hear everyone speak today. There are absolutely fantastic people here to speak about the steps we can continue to take to raise awareness to advocate for natural weather. Domenic and I's main objective is to lobby for transparency in both the geoengineering and weather modification industries to see an end to weather control efforts, while helping the public become more aware of the fact that the government is allowing long-term, large-scale experimentations with our weather. The materials used in these programs pose a hazardous risk to human health. The fallout from these programs are being documented all over the world, and the media is not covering this issue. My name is Jolene Marsh, and I'm here to help present the history of weather modification. Our collection of archives has changed the chemtrail debate. No longer do we hear, what proof do you have that chemtrails are real? The history of weather modification has been pivotal to this movement. Most people here are dedicated to getting those around them informed and involved of weather modification techniques and solar radiation management technology. These two ideas truly do go hand in hand, as the ionization of aerosolized particles to induce plasmic skies is also done to generate precipitation. Since the late 1800s, man has been trying to induce weather and control the outcome of storm systems, as 80% of this economy is weather sensitive. This article from the Montreal Gazette in 1973 states that Canadian citizens have been extremely concerned with the secret military weather operations carried out by the government upon the climate. The frustration of Canadian citizens became clear when they tried to have their answers met at the National Assembly, but were denied an investigation. This is an ongoing tactic our legislative officials use to deny such programs even exist. In Canada, the consent of the governed is a value that is basic to our understanding of a free and democratic society, as ruled by the Supreme Court of Canada in 1998. So my question is, has the World Meteorological Association ever requested consent from citizens in regards to these long-term, large-scale weather modification programs? Although they may be legal, they are not lawful. Domenic Marrama's hard work and dedication is incredible to witness. The time and effort involved in his research to provide this community with credible findings is astounding. Jim Lee's collaboration, passion, and expertise has evolved weathermodificationhistory.com into the world's most comprehensive weather control archive, with hundreds of verified historical facts, images, and videos. Weather modification history's compelling evidence is easy to browse, exceedingly accurate, and encyclopedic in scope. This website was crafted by dedicated individuals to help you discern fact from fiction with meticulously organized research that offers the activist community a credible resource. It is our goal to inform you of daily weather modification experiments and get you involved with exposing the health and legal aspects of the unregulated climate engineering industry. This website will empower you to take action and raise awareness of the little known but lengthy history of weather control and the men who dare attempt it.
All righty, let's play a video here. I'm actually gonna put I have to take this off now to play the video.
We shall propose further cooperative effort between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
Hello everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Domenic, Marrama, and I've created a collection of articles on the history of weather modification to present you here today. Some of the methods used to modify the weather include hail shooting cannons, electrically charged sand, exploding chemical balloons, black carbon soot sprayed from airplanes, electrocuting the sky to produce condensation, modifying the weather with silver iodide, dry ice, salt, water, barium, lithium, sulfuric acid, and liquid air. They also use radio waves to manipulate the ionosphere in the weather. In this photo here, which I have come up with about 300 different historical news articles, and I read through all of them and picked these people's names out of the articles and did research on them and put them into one spot. So pretty much this is the group of prominent people who have been involved in weather modification throughout history. Some important figures include Charles Hatfield, Vincent Schaefer, Irvin Langmuir, and Edward Teller. If you'd like to learn more about these people, please visit the website at weathermodificationhistory.com, and there's lots of articles on them. So before we get into weather modification and when it really started taking off, which is about the 1890s, we're going to go into just a short article here from the 1500s, which I found from the American Meteorological Society. And it's about a gentleman named Benvenuto Cellini. And he had a theory on rain stopping, that if you could fire artillery at the rain clouds, you could stop the rain. And this was actually published in the American Meteorological Society, so it's pretty groundbreaking information that they were trying to control the weather all the way back in the 1500s. But we'll move fast forward here, all the way up to the 1890s. So we start with an article from the Boston Evening Transcript, and it's titled, "Rainmaking Test Unpopular in Washington." The Agricultural Department of Washington, along with the military, bombarded the sky with dynamite strapped to kites and mortar explosives in a rainmaking test that was immediately halted after public outcry. And so these things were sent up on kites, and they used a ground charge to explode the chemicals that were in the sky and condense the moisture and create rain, was the theory of how it works. And the next article, Producing Rain in 1891, was about a gentleman named Carl Myers working with the US government, and he conducted an experiment with over 100 mini hydrogen bombs, which were exploded in the atmosphere in an attempt to produce rain. The third article there is about how the US government spent $2,000 in 1890 to create rain with the use of high-altitude balloon explosives. The experiment didn't yield adequate results due to the shortage of money involved in such a large project. So in 1891, they spent an additional $7,000, which is $200,000 if you had to put that in today's sum of money. And going on to the 1900s here, the Star reports that Charles Hatfield made a deal of 1,000 people of drought-ridden California that he would produce rain. And he collected that $1,000 and also made it rain 18 more times in California, causing floods and huge problems over there. In 1905, the Daily Dawson News reported that Hatfield set up a 20-foot tall tower in which he placed pans filled with secret mixture of 23 different rain-attracting chemicals. So he made a tower and put all these pans out everywhere and let the chemicals just evaporate into the sky. And then he came back in 1907 to he worked in Oregon, and he guaranteed rain. And he made rain for the farmers of Sherman County. But this time he built himself 4 towers and used a new method by which he shot electricity into the sky in order to condense the moisture with a combination of the pans that were laying out to have the chemicals just get released into the sky. And moving on here to 1910, we're going to try and go through here really quick. We're going all the way up to the 1990s. So the Leader releases an article titled Rainmaking Scheme, Application for a Patent. So an engineer, Dr. Balsillie, filed for a rainmaking scheme patent, and his patent involved sending balloons a mile up into the sky, which then released electricity to ionize the air and condense its moisture. And the article right beside it, which is Popular Science Monthly, in 1919, Europe began erecting hail rods and hail cannons by the thousands across farmlands in a large-scale project to suppress the hail from hitting crops. Hail cannons were used to shoot large rings of gas and smoke into the clouds to condense the moisture and induce rainfall before it can turn to hail. Copper hail rods were used to discharge the atmosphere of electricity, similar to what we have today, but they were erecting them by the thousands out there. So by 1910, there were already 10,000 hail cannons set up in Italy, 2,000 in Austria, and 1,000 in France. Another article from Popular Science Monthly titled, "Is Rainmaking Riddle Solved? New Attempt to Produce Heavy Rainfall by Spraying Storm Clouds with Electrically Charged Sand." In 1923, the Army Air Service dissipates clouds with electrically charged sand. 80 pounds of sand charged to 1,500 volts could dissolve a cloud covering 2 square miles. And in 1923, Popular Science, this is the same article, rain could be produced on hand by ionizing soot particles with an electrical charge from a plane, followed by a second plane spraying charged sand. And in 1925, newly developed rainmaking towers send pulsing currents between the ground and upper strata, in which condensation of cloud moisture and brings on the rain. And that was William Haight here on the right, who had this tower which used electricity to ionize the atmosphere. So they were doing this way back in the day, and it's only gotten stronger, their technology, and more efficient. Okay, where are we here? Moving on to the Spokesman Review. And this is actually a great article. It's from 1934, and it's titled, Fires Bomb and Showers Fall on Crowd in 10 Minutes. So synthetic rain attempt successful in Texas after 600 moisture bombs are dropped via aircraft. And in 1936, Popular Science reports how hundreds of odd schemes emerged to produce rain, such as heavy artillery, loud concussions, releasing smoke particles via a train, mitigating sea moisture, and reflecting air currents with artificial mountains. So just some really far out there schemes that they were doing, trying all sorts of different things to modify the weather. 1941, Prescott Courier, sulfuric acid is rainmaker. We all see the David Keith and, Colbert show saying how acid rain is a rainmaker then. So here it is, the article right here that confirms it. So the American Association for the Advancement of Science announced sulfuric acid could be used to make rain droplets. And in 1947, the Daily News reported how they could destroy a hurricane. The Army, Navy, and U.S. Air Force and General Electric conducted the first ever attempt at stopping a hurricane in what became known as Project Cirrus. The first attempt, they dropped 80 pounds of dry ice into the hurricane. The Tuscaloosa News, and this was in 1947. Cloud weapon puzzles experts. Plane maker Glenn L. Martin disclosed before a congressional committee that the Army conducted experiments to make radioactive clouds by shooting radioactive matter out of a jet aircraft. And, oops, here we go. There we go. I got it. The Daily News reports in, where are we here? 1949, how Charles Hall, a 30-year-old veteran rainmaker, tries new method of seeding clouds via aircraft by shooting 1,200 volts of electricity into a cumulus cloud and spraying with electrically charged water. And reported in the Argus, both these articles here, they explain how the Royal Australian Air Force successfully created a rainstorm for the first time by bombing cumulus clouds with 250 pounds of dry ice. And the clouds rested at 20,000 feet and then expanded up to 30,000 feet after the bombing. So that was 10,000 more in altitude. The clouds rose just because of their experiment there. And the rainstorm lasted for about 2 hours after they did that. This is a really great article from the Stansted Journal talking about how rain produced by new chain reaction method. So in this article, it goes into, let me just read it here. The new method for producing rain was announced by Dr. Irving Langmuir of General Electric to the National Academy of Sciences. But unlike the dry ice method of silver iodide of producing rain, which are effective only in supercooled clouds above the freezing level, this new method produces rain at any temperature. So now they're able to produce rain at any temperature. People will say, well, only certain conditions can it rain. Well, no, they can do it in any condition now with their chemicals. And this is the first article here that I found. And it's probably one of the first ones of people actually speaking out about the trails in their skies. And this is dating back to 1948, how residents of Port Augusta were left in shock after they witnessed trails left by high-flying airplanes stretching across the horizon. Air Force and Army men who said they had witnessed the trails reported that they had never seen anything like it in their careers. And moving forward here, the Northern Times, ownership of clouds sought. Richard Hammond files a formal claim for the water and all the clouds passing over his 1,200-acre ranch in Reno, USA. And then right after that, we have a law publication foresees future litigation because this gentleman has filed for a patent and now they want to get on board and stop what they're doing. So we have another article coming out right after that where the Desert News reports, rainmakers beware, cloud may belong to someone else. So the Stanford Law Review begins discussions on cloud ownership and creation of rainmaking laws and regulations. So now they're starting to talk about it because people want to start filing for patents for the clouds above their heads. And in 1950, there was an article titled Rain Experiment May Change Climate of the West. So 320,000 millions of gallons of rain produced from silver iodide released through smoke generators. Weather stations confirm rainfall didn't occur naturally. And here is a great article from the Central Oregon Daily newspaper titled Petitions Seek Rainmaking Ban. So just like how we're talking about we don't want weather modification happening, we want them to stop spraying our skies, well, there's people in Oregon all the way back in the 1950s. So petitioners seek to ban private rainmaking. Private firms seed hail storms along with rain-inducing clouds using mechanical and chemical means. And in 1952, you now need the official okay to do rainmaking. Laws and legislations around weather modification in full swing globally. Licenses issued to aerial rainmakers commence. And this article, which is a whole spread by Popular Science on steering hurricanes. So in 1956, technology to prevent, reduce, and steer hurricanes field trialed and tested. The U.S. Advisory Committee on Weather Control concludes in a report that rainfall is definitely increased by seeding and that the prevention of hailstorms is a hopeful prospect. Moving forward, the Gadsden Times releases an article. In 1958, President Eisenhower signs a bill authorizing the National Science Foundation to carry out a research program for weather control, particularly in areas subject to droughts and floods. The Florence Times, Navy creation destroys clouds. Navy airplanes drop carbon black in both solid and liquid suspension form into clouds and into clear skies. Carbon sprayed into clear skies creates clouds when introduced into clouds, and it clears them up at the cost of 18 cents a cloud. And here we have another article about those pesky trails in the sky and how Palm Springs residents, so Palm Springs Chamber of Commerce tells Washington that the most serious and urgent problem is jet trails block out sun affecting tourism, and the Air Force is concerned. I'm sure they were. And in 1961, a sodium cloud was fired into the sky. NASA fired a sodium cloud into the sky over 102 miles up. This created an orange cloud that could be seen for hundreds of miles from the ground. In 1967, NASA did another cloud study where they launched 18 rockets filled with sodium vapor and trimethyl aluminum to study the cloud strata. And then Ellensburg Daily Record, we have scientists spreading coal on glaciers to absorb the heat of the sun in an experiment to melt the glaciers. So we have all this talk about how, the glaciers are melting, the glaciers are melting. Well, they actually had the experiments back in the day where they were purposely trying to melt the glaciers. It's just insanity. And the Bend Bulletin in Oregon, President Johnson presses for more scientific means of changing nation's weather and climate. Okay, we'll move on here. This is a great article from the College Reporter, and it talks about how biologists predict disaster and man's abuse of nature. So in this article, it says the UN reports that jet trails are creating perpetual cloud cover over the Earth and trapping in the heat. Studies to melt the polar ice caps to make the Arctic navigable underway. So in 1970, jet pollution hit. Private lawsuits filed against airlines as jet aircraft exhaust cover the skies. And the next article beside it, U.S. to clamp down on jet pollution. So U.S. clamps down on jet pollution at the cost of $30 million, redesigned combustors on all aircraft. And right beside it is another article, most jet engines to fly smokeless by 1972. So 85% of aircraft are now equipped with new combustors to limit the clouds of exhaust and pollution in the atmosphere. I know they reported this, but it doesn't mean they necessarily did it. And in 1978, Jets may affect weather. Research in the U.S., same as usual. Jets blamed for the weather changes as jet trails increase and merge to form a high blanket of cirrus clouds. These are all in these articles word for word, almost. Okay, here we go. Ocala Star Banner. The ability to alleviate drought, curb hurricanes, suppress lightning, and hail fog made possible by government research. The San Francisco Examiner reports how another CIA plot, Cuba crops. So efforts to destabilize Cuba carried out as cloud seeding causes economic and political harm. CIA tampers with the weather in the Soviet Union, China, and other communist countries to enhance the power of U.S. food sales. And in 1978, Bangor Daily News, NASA creates clouds over Alaska in weather experiment. NASA conducts a large-scale weather experiment called Project Cameo to study how particles move in space. They ejected 4 canisters of barium, each creating a cloud of 600 miles wide. And in 1980, there was cloud seeding over Vietnam, large-scale tests to examine radiation fallout of chemical cloud dispersal. Yeah, so there was a bunch of cloud seeding in Vietnam, which flooded the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And then after that, we have the U.S. turns rain into a war weapon, so they've actually turned the weather into a weapon. And then you have Russia coming out in the next article saying, hey, we need to ban this. This is crazy. They're trying to modify the weather here and use it for warfare purposes. So then U.S. is like, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, we're on board. Yeah, we should ban that too. And then the UN goes and bans it, but only for warfare purposes, not necessarily for in your own countries. See, they can do it in their own countries, but over here, when they banned it, it was only for warfare, which allows them to keep doing it today, because it's technically not warfare purposes. But in that document from Weather Warfare Ban approved from the Blade, it talks about how the UN votes 125-0 in favor of banning weather warfare. US, France, Mali, and Chile and Paraguay abstained from the vote. Well, I wonder why, because they're still doing it. The Montreal Gazette reports how Winnipeg tests of 1953 create a cloud of concern. This article isn't necessarily to do with modifying the weather, but what they did is the military in the States here flew over St. Louis and over Winnipeg to try and see the effects of a radioactive cloud in the event, if that ever happened, what the effects would be from an enemy. But they did it on their own population. And in the articles, there was Freedom of Information Acts from Canadian authorities saying to the citizens, why did you guys do that? And the Canadian authorities said, well, because we didn't want to cause any, public outcry from Canadian citizens or anyone else. Well, no kidding, you're spraying us. You're obviously going to get public outcry from people. Crazy. And so cloud seeding program in the Ottawa Citizen is a $20 million error in Alberta, where I live. So they're still doing it today, but they're having errors worth $20 million that are falling on the taxpayer. It's unbelievable. And in 1981, the Canberra Times reports how jets are changing the climate. Here, another classic example. A weather study showed that a 10% increase in cloudiness in parts of Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Indiana, Ohio had coincided with the rapid growth of commercial aviation since the 1960s. And Dr. Stanley Chagnon, head of the atmospheric science program at the Illinois Water Survey Department, stated, "We know the jets make clouds, and we believe they are the major cause of increased cloudiness in these flight paths." And Dr. Stanley Chagnon calls for a scientific investigation in order to assess the impact of man-made clouds on the climate. And this is the last one here. This just is a confirming article here that was followed up. The U.S. is a little bit slower in reporting to their citizens that they're spraying them, but they also reported that chemicals sprayed on St. Louis city officials want information. That's the same has to do with the Winnipeg one, except we asked for our government to disclose it before you guys. So, and then we go on to the last two here. NASA conducts a test to ionize the electrical fields surrounding the Earth. They released a satellite which ejected a single canister containing barium and lithium vapor. The canister created a cloud which stretched thousands of miles above the Earth. And one article is just talking about how they're planning it, and then it follows up with an article of how they actually did it. So that is everything. Thanks for listening to my presentation. I hope you get something out of it. And you can find more information at weathermodificationhistory.com, and there's a Facebook page, Facebook.com/weathermodificationhistory. Thank you.